say on it.
Yeah. That's it. Off you go.
Welcome to the Cheltenham Borough Council Audit, Compliance and Governance Committee being held today, Wednesday, July the 11th. I don't think so. Wednesday, the 26th of September?
That's it.
Marvellous. My name is Councillor Adrian Bamford and I'm the chair of the committee. The meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast on its YouTube channel and for training purposes. If there are any breaks in transmission to the YouTube stream, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period until any issues are resolved. Can I ask everyone to speak clearly when addressing the meeting and that officers introduce themselves when they speak? Right. So the first item to consider is any apologies. I believe we have one, but it was rescinded, as David is with us. So have we not had any other apologies from the other members? That's very strange. Anyway, we will proceed. Are there any declarations of interest from any of the other members present? Thank you very much. So I'll move us on to minutes of the last meeting. If you've all had a chance to read those, can I ask you to indicate if there's anything you feel is incorrect about those minutes? I'll take the...
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't voting.
Right, well, there's three of us to vote, though, if we need a vote.
I'm happy to sign.
Excellent, okay. So there's three of us in favour of accepting that, Judith. That's Tabby, if you're okay with that. David and myself. Under point 6, there's an issue on taxi licensing which we'll come to in the internal audit report for your information, David. And I wondered also under point 6 if we needed to consider the final bullet point, because it talks about me getting together with John Payne, and obviously John Payne unfortunately is no longer on this committee, so we perhaps need to reconsider how we would get the chairs of ONS and ANC, G&C together to collaborate about the update of the future plan. So can I ask you to take that, well, note that as a matter that needs to be dealt with, possibly when do we have a new chair of ONS? Do you know? No. Okay.
It's due to be discussed at October Council.
Okay. Well, perhaps we can take it forward after that. Right. I will sign the minutes then. And we will move on to item number 4, which is public member questions. There are none, so we can quickly move on to item 5, the corporate risk register. Now, Anne, can I ask you to take us through this? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. At Audit, Compliance and Governance Committee on the 19th of April, a new risk management policy was approved. This policy detailed a new approach to reporting, with a report coming to this committee on a quarterly basis. So this is actually the first of these reports outlining the Council's corporate risks. Future reports, as I mentioned in there, will detail risk movements in the quarter, but obviously that's not been done because this is the first report to this committee. So I'm happy to take any questions that members have on the report.
Item 2.3. The corporate leadership team considers and reviews strategic risks on a monthly basis. Is that documented in some way for presenting onwards? Is that the plan for that to be noted and brought to this meeting?
So it is documented through the minutes of the meetings that we have. I can do a summary of the discussions if that is a requirement of this report going forward. It's the first report that we've done, so I'm happy to take on board any of your suggestions or comments for future reports.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just thinking about how the information could best flow between that group and our own. Okay, are there any other comments or questions from... Sorry to rush you into this, Matt. In that case, I'll come back with one of my own again, if that's okay. When we're looking at, this is really just a sort of my own education or reminding of how the thing works. On probability, presumably, there's 5 levels, aren't there? And it's something like very likely, quite likely, possible. Okay. So in that context, I mean, you're not asking us to approve each of these items as being valid in any way. I just wondered if there's anyone who's got any comments or concerns about any of these items. Not that we have to, just as you've all read your report, I wonder if there's any comments you have in relation to them. If not,
Chair.
Thank you, Dave.
So just going through the appendix at the back, it does seem pretty comprehensive in terms of what it's captured, and I'm content with that. And I think if we're keeping it under review and adding other things as those risks materialise and just making sure that it's a living document, which is what I'm expecting the council is doing, then I think that's a pretty good starting point as a baseline for what we're trying to audit. So, yeah, I'm content, and I think the officers looking at this, very sort of skimming through it, it does seem a very comprehensive and good place to be starting from. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. There was just one item that, from a very personal point of view, as a member of the Gloucestershire Airport Board, I had to note that we have a probability score of 3 for the fact that the income from the Airport Board does not cover the cost of borrowing. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't. So I guess that makes it the probability score somewhat different. But just to note that one. Right, can we then move... Graham.
Yeah, I'm guessing they're all financial risk. Is that the case in terms of this report? But just one thing I note that some of them are quite existential problems. Problems, vulnerabilities around recycling, around the cost of living crisis, etc. what's the action from this? What does the CPC do from this report, and what does reduce mean? How do we reduce or mitigate those risks?
So obviously they've got a lot of the controls, which are the mitigations we undertake. And what we do is we go through this on a regular basis for the higher scoring risks. And we actually review whether those mitigations and controls are in place. So we check with the risk manager they're actually in place. And then we do what we call as an effectiveness review. So we review if they are effectively reducing the level of risk so we can bring the scoring down. So if they're not effective in reducing, and that is the action we've taken to reduce that risk, then we will look to put other mitigations or controls in place to make sure that we are effectively managing that. So that's what happens, and that's the work that we do with the individual risk managers. So.
Thank you, Anne. Is there any other questions we want to... Tabby?
Thank you so much. So this was actually, I did really appreciate how comprehensive this is. And something that kind of caught my interest is the fact that we were looking briefly at resourcing concurrent incidents. I was just kind of wondering, because like it's quite easy for things to be very siloed, and even though that gives us really good objectivity, the thing is that I was kind of seeing a kind of a bit of cross-referencing between different issues. Is there any kind of mechanisms that's going to be sort of developed as a result of looking at like similar problems like homelessness, for instance, and actually just the fact that there's significant overlap between homelessness and asylum, asylum seekers when they actually lose government support when their applications go through, for instance, they immediately lose access to government supplied housing, so that kind of does feed into a homelessness issue. So in some ways that's just one example off the top of my head. I was just kind of wondering if there's going to be any kind of working strategy to kind of joining up issues and just kind of making sure that, you know, we can have solutions to kind of multiple issues, just kind of in, because I kind of feel like that might ideally be a good way of managing cost or mitigating, you know, impact on people. I was wondering about that a bit.
Okay, so I don't actually know the answer to your question because of, I'll have a conversation with Martin Stacey, who is the risk owner for all of those areas that you've just mentioned, obviously asylum seekers and the homelessness issues. And what I'll do is I'll come back to you, Tabby, and just go through what he's doing to actually make sure that we cross-reference those. It's the same risk manager, so there will be work that links between them. Okay?
Because in some ways, like that was just one example specifically, but I'm thinking that there's probably going to be similar issues, and if potentially there's scope in the future for working group to identify that kind of thing, just in terms of like the multiple deprivations indices, like the ONS working group on that, I think that was really, really effective. So I'd kind of be interested in sort of seeing a similar thing for risk management, particularly since I'm aware that not all council members actually have risk management training as well. So I kind of think that anything that empowers members to be able to identify potential risks, and you know, maybe we can sense problems when they're still small problems, we can kind of prevent them from escalating, or like try and find some ways of reporting them so that they don't become big problems later on. I hope that that's relatively clear. I know this is slightly nebulous stuff, but you know, I really appreciate your consideration of it, really, I think.
Thanks very much, Councillor Joy. It was a very good point. It was something I noticed, that there are a number of items. For instance, on page 15, the bottom item talking about leisure and culture venues, and then you go to page 19, the fourth item down, talks about leisure and culture services. They're actually very similar in what they're looking at. So if it's possible to, as this evolves, if it's possible to somehow get them into categories that when we're looking at them, we can see where the overlap arises. Thank you. Right, can we move on to the next item, which is the audit findings report of 21-22, and I'll ask Alex, is it from Alex? Sorry. Just before you start, could I mention to members that the page numbering is a little confusing here. The page numberings on the Grant Thornton report are small numbers in the bottom right-hand corner. So when you're talking about the report, if we can try and use their numberings on their report. And the other thing I felt I ought to mention really is that we are looking here at the financial year 21-22 at the same time that as members we are considering the budget for 24-25. So it would be great to put this to bed tonight if we possibly can and move on to closer financial years. Thank you. So over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up your comment about we're doing 21-22 accounts. There are some councils that are in far worse a position, but I appreciate this is not a position that any of us particularly want to be in. And I'm sure you're aware of the reasons for it. There's quite a lot of sector delays. There is lots of discussion at the national level about how to actually alleviate these. Lots of discussion. Be great to see some action. So, because I think, you know, nobody wants to be in the position where you've got accounts that are outstanding. There's lots of stuff that's in the papers about the fact that issues that happened at Birmingham, Thurrock, Slough, Croydon, they're all as a result of unaudited accounts. So whether that's true or not is, but that's often the levied at the auditors. So picking up the audit findings report, I'm going to confuse things even more because the report I've got in front of you is an updated version. So if I start talking about something and you're confused, please do shout. Obviously, when we did the audit findings report and submitted it for committee, we were still working on various things. So I'll give you an update as to where we actually are as of now. I think we're nearly there, and yes, absolutely, I'm really keen to get it done and dusted in the next week, not least because I'm actually leaving Grant Thornton and I would like to finish this before I actually go. I'm moving on to Bishop Fleming. The audit findings report brings together the findings from our code audit, principally the accounts work that we've done on 21-22. And you, as those charged with governance, are required to consider our report, and in particular the unadjusted misstatements, which I'll come on to in a bit, before you actually A, approve the accounts, and B, approve and sign the letter of representation. So in terms of where we're at, so in terms of the page that's headed up headlines, which I think is our page 3, that really sets out where we are in terms of the financial statements. So as I say, some things have moved on, so I'll give you an update of where we're at the moment. So there have been some adjustments to the financial statements. The figure that we're currently at is 1.777 million adjustment to the council's comprehensive income and expenditure account. That's slightly different to the figure that you've got there. The good news is, though, that doesn't actually affect the general fund balance. So that's the amount of money that you've got to actually spend. And that's predominantly because the adjustments have occurred to property, plant and equipment revaluations and also the pension figures as well, which are on the balance sheet. As I say, our work is substantially complete, and the only bits that we've left outstanding, and I had a quick chat with Gemma at the beginning of this meeting, is we're waiting for a revised pension figure to do with Cheltenham Borough Homes, receipt of the management letter, which obviously we can't get until you've approved and actually signed after this meeting, and review of the final set of accounts. So we always do a quick check to make sure that I'm actually signing the opinion on the correct set of accounts, and that's one of the last things we actually do. So that's where we are at the moment, and we anticipate giving an unmodified opinion. So that's good. I know sometimes we get confusion about what does it mean when you talk about unmodified or unqualified. It's a positive thing. So I think that reflects well on the finance team. Moving over the page then, I'll just touch briefly on the value for money arrangements. You'll probably be aware under the Code of Audit Practice, we're required to look at not just the accounts and give an opinion on the accounts, but also do a value for money commentary. This work has yet to be completed for both 21-22 and 22-23. What we're proposing is doing a joint report, because otherwise there is a danger that by the time we've done 22-23, it's so out of date, it's completely meaningless. We still have to consider the 2 years in isolation, but actually bring them together in one report. That work has actually commenced, and my colleagues from the VFM team are actually doing that work at the moment. So I would hope that you would get the auditor's annual report, at least as an interim, by Christmas, hopefully. And that's looking at the three areas that you're probably aware of: financial sustainability, governance, and the three E's: economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. So in terms of what else I have to do as the external auditor, so I have to consider statutory duties. Is there anything that I've come across during the audit that gives me cause for concern, or I might have to perhaps look at an objection, or issue a public interest report or something like that? There's nothing to actually report in terms of 21-22. So again, a positive thing. At the end of doing all my audit work, I issue what's known as the certificate, which effectively closes down the audit year. Unfortunately, once I give the opinion on the accounts, I won't be able to certify the closure of the 21-22 audit until the VFM work is actually done. So that'll be done at a later date. As soon as we can possibly do it, we do it. Otherwise, it can get a little bit messy, if I'm honest. At the bottom of that page, we've just highlighted some what we call significant matters, and they were just some things that we came across as part of the audit. So we've highlighted the fact that the draft accounts submitted for audit were incomplete. Some of the group account stuff was still not available. And actually, I think that was because the finance team were waiting on information from a third party. But that took a while to come through. In the meantime, our audit team had to move on and do another audit, because obviously we don't have the capacity to allow people to just be sat around sort of waiting for information. They had to move on elsewhere. And then obviously we've come back. Yeah?
So that information, are you now satisfied that that information is here and that we can proceed? Particularly the stuff from GAL. Yeah?
Yes. Yes. So we've now had that information. Obviously, my colleagues who are picking up the 22-23 audit will equally be looking for that information as part of their group accounts for 22-23. We've also highlighted the fact that there were some delays in getting some of the information from the valuer, and that obviously, and having 3 valuation experts, it's a little bit unusual for a district council, but obviously that's because of the nature of some of the entities that you're working with. That did take a little bit longer than perhaps we were anticipating. So that's a sort of summary of where we're at, if you like. I'm happy to take questions on the rest. I wasn't necessarily going to take you through page by page, because hopefully you've seen most of the issues that are in there. The one thing that I will note is I think we did raise an issue to do with the housing stock revaluation. And we at the time we said that it was going to be what's known as an unadjusted misstatement in the accounts, i.e. the council weren't going to actually adjust for that misstatement. They have since done that, so actually that is now actually reflected in the accounts. And obviously when you come to look at the letter of rep and unadjusted misstatements, I think there's an odd page in the papers that you've got in front of you. I think it's page 67. That should actually be linked to the letter of rep, but it actually includes in there the 736, I think it is, to do with the council house dwellings revaluation, but that has been adjusted, so you don't need to actually worry about that. So as I say, I'm happy to talk a bit more or take any questions. I appreciate there's quite a lot of information in there. Hopefully you've had a chance to actually sort of look at some of the stuff that's in there.
Thanks very much, Alex. We'll have some questions, and if you feel there's something we've missed, do let us know. So I'll open the floor first of all for any questions you may have. David, Councillor Winningham.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to look at which page is it? It's hour 35, and I'm afraid I think it's hour 35, your number 13, where we have an entire page on the MRP issue. Just going to the end of this, the final bullet seems to say that there is now sufficient assurance that the council has got that management. So have we now put that item to bed, as it were? Are the auditors happy that we've not done anything wrong and that we are still, you know, that this was a one-off and we're all happy with that? Can I just check that, please?
It's a bit of a leading question, that one. I think it would be fair to say that we're not wholly happy with what the council is actually doing, but there's nothing that we've seen that suggests it's either ultra vires illegal or that actually it would have a material effect on the accounts. I think what we're all hanging our hat on is this additional guidance that or changes to the regulations that the government will be issuing. But I think, I don't know if Paul has an update, but I've certainly not seen anything that's come out as yet around MRP.
So if I could just tie that in also to our page 44, your page 22, as it comes up as the major area of concern as we go through the report. I'm very pleased that David's raised that, because I think it's worth having a discussion to find out from Gemma, Paul and yourself if you're satisfied that we're in the right place and moving forward. Thanks. I don't know which of you wants to talk about.
Well, in terms of the revised guidance, the latest is that there is a further consultation that's due out next month. So I understand from my contacts that consultation has taken on board a number of the inputs from consultees, which presumably will include both the external audit sector and obviously local authority, and there will obviously be a clear set of guidance. But I think throughout all of the consultations, regardless of what they determine to be the new regulations, they've been quite clear in using this word about no respective changes, and it would be from the 1st of April 2024. So I think from the council's perspective, I think we've found a pragmatic solution which meets halfway, whereby we can obviously sign the accounts up.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, that's I find that reassuring. Hopefully, as you're nodding, I'm taking that as assent. Okay, thanks. And any other questions that you've got for Alex or Gemma or Paul in relation to these? Matt, Councillor Babbage.
Sorry, apologies if I missed it, but is there an update on the airport reporting? Because that was a highlight. Sorry, I can't remember which page it was now, earlier on in the report. I just wondered if that had been resolved.
Good question. I think the answer is yes. So I think we had some additional information back, and we were happy with the information that we were actually given. So we were able to take assurance over those figures in the accounts.
I did actually speak to the current finance lead for the airport yesterday, and they assured me that was the case. So I'm pleased to hear that. Any other questions for Alex? Just check if there's anything that I was concerned about that we haven't covered. The items on page 32 of your report, page 54 of ours. Do you feel we need to discuss those further here, or do you think there's an agreement on the way forward between yourselves, Grant Thornton, and the finance team? But Gemma, yeah, thank you.
Yes, happy to address that as part of my item, but I think what the committee will see when they get the audit findings report for the 22-23 accounts is progress against these. I think when we initially received these actions from the 2021 audit, I think that was in January or February 22, so some of them were able to be sort of partly actioned and some not so, but I think what you will see when you compare these actions to the report at the end of the 22-23 is that they've been fully actioned.
Thank you very much, Gemma. I think it's very reassuring. So, if there's nothing else, if there's no further questions on that report, I think we need to vote Let me just check this. We need to vote that we've considered this report and are happy to receive it. I mean, I'm not quite sure if that's a motion, but just need to note it. Okay, well, we're just going to note that, and Matt, go on.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to check. I wasn't sure if I had the impression we were pausing for questions rather than, I didn't want the, sorry, I'll order this. If there were any other comments you're about to make before we cut you off.
No, thank you. I think I've covered, and you've had the report previously, so I'm hoping that you did read it, and if there are any questions, you would raise them.
That's great. So if you're all happy to note that, we'll move straight on to item number, is it number 10? Yeah. Number 10, which is Gemma's report, where at the end of which I am hoping that you'll be happy for me to sign off the statement of accounts for 21-22 from our perspective. Congratulations if you've read and studied all 130 pages. It's fair to say I'd rather not be tested on any of the detail of that, if that's all right. Gemma, do you want to run us through your report?
Thank you, Chair. So what we've got here today is the final draft of the 21-22 Statement of Accounts. So they were published in draft form on the 28th of July 22, so that was in line with the extended statutory deadline at the time. Obviously, from Alex's presentation, you've seen the significant amount of work that's gone into this, both from our team and from the audit team. We've got one item outstanding other than the signing of the management rep letter. Noting, obviously, we have had some issues with the timing of information that we've received from the airport and from the experts, but have worked through those, I think, quite well over the last sort of 6 weeks or so with Grant Thornton. In terms of sort of the delay in the timing, I think some of the most significant adjustments we've had to make from the original draft to the final draft that you've got today is the pension liability. We've had to have that revalued because of the time between the 31st of March 22, which was obviously the year end, and today. So both for CBH as part of the consolidation of the group accounts and our own as part of the single entity. So significant movements there. So what we're asking for today, or what we're recommending, is approval to delegate to Councillor Bamford as the chair of the audit committee to sign the accounts and the letter of representation on behalf of the committee, subject to no significant issues being identified between now and then. So before I take any questions that you've got on the accounts and the process, I just want to say a big thank you to John and the team for the perseverance they've shown over the last year or so, and also for Grant Thornton. I think we've worked well over the last 6 months or so to address some big changes and some issues that we've had. So yeah, thanks to them, and I recommend the report.
Thanks, Gemma. Can I ask if any of the four councillors have got any questions for Gemma in relation to these accounts? Or if you are satisfied that I go ahead and sign off 21-22. Quite momentous, really. Let's hope, it's my first full committee. If we can do 1 year per committee, we'll be doing okay, aren't we? Okay, so I think this ought to go to the vote. All those in favour of me signing off the letter of representation, please show. Thank you very much. It's unanimous. Judith, how would you like me to do this? Or do you want to be a physical? Fantastic. Right. So now we'll move back in the agenda to item number 3, 4, 5, 7. We're on to number 7, aren't we? So, I believe that's Lucy's item. I was delighted to see the payroll and treasury management coming out so well in this report, but I'll hand over to Lucy to run through it.
Thank you, Chair. This is the usual update from the internal audit team. It gives you an update of the work that has been concluded since the last meeting of this committee, and it also gives you progress on the audit plan as is. There are 4 final reports in your pack tonight, of which, as Chair has already referred to, 2 are high substantial, so we're very pleased with those. We've concluded audits on business continuity management. We also continue to follow up all agreed actions, and what I'd like to add at this point is that the 2 agreed actions that were outstanding for the taxi licensing have now been closed. We closed those last week, so we had sufficient and very good evidence from the team that we were able to close those agreed actions. Nothing else to add at this point, Chair, so happy to take any questions.
Well, I can see David nodding on the licensing matter. Do you want to I trust you're happy with that. Anyway, what question do you have for him?
So I was just looking at obviously the business continuity recommendations. So we've got 2 recommendations on page 84, and I think there are 4 observations that may well turn into recommendations on 85, 86. I'm guessing the question on those, not for internal audit but more for our officers, is what are the timescales for effectively implementing the recommendations or mitigating what's been found, because obviously the business continuity is something that you only know you need it when you actually need it. So they're obviously, it's just looking at what the timescale is, and if that can't be answered now, can we get those timescales to the next meeting? It might, going forward, also be useful if we had when the recommendations come forward, if there are timescales agreed with management as to when those will be implemented, so that we can follow those up. But I may have missed that in the document.
Sorry, yeah, I can respond to the 2 priority 2s that are in the Revs and Bends and the elections report. Those are in Appendix B. One of them, the numbers are 2315 and 2334 on the left-hand side. So one was in respect to offline access to business continuity plans, and we've got a deadline or an agreed action date of the 30th of September for that one. So we'll be following that one up shortly. And the annual testing and update of departmental business continuity plans has a date of the 31st of December on it.
You happy to leave that 30th of September date? It's close, obviously, but you're happy with that? Fabulous. Okay, that's great. Thanks. Okay. Thanks very much for that, then, Lucy. You happy for us not to vote on that one as well and just note it?
I think I will note it, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we note that and move on to item number 8 from Emma.
Thank you, Chair. As Lucy said, this is the usual update from my team regarding the work that we've been undertaking. I did, on the appendix about the work plan, try to add a bit more information for you. So the body of the report still reports on our general operational delivery, some of the bigger projects, but that work plan to try and give you some information about where it's at, what's going on, because sometimes that doesn't necessarily make the body of my report, so hopefully it's a bit more informative. In terms of the content, I mentioned at 3.4 about the business grant schemes. That really is coming to a complete end. So DBT are now sending through all the paperwork to show to confirm the debt
liability has been transferred to them where there is unpaid debt. So that's complete and finished. They've confirmed the three debts that we sent to them are all going to be transferred. So that really is coming to an end. It's gone on some time. In addition to the work that we do as per normal with NFI, so all the checks of the SPD anomalies, we're also doing some extra work with the revenues team on proactive reviews. That only started this year, and as at 3.7, I've indicated how many emails we sent out, but we'll come back to you with results and what's most effective, work with the revenues team to confirm what's best regarding reviewing the SPDs. In terms of other information that I didn't put in here, I'll provide more information at my April report as I would normally with RIPA, but we had an inspection a couple of months ago and everything went through, all passed, no recommendations. So that's really good news. Policies have been checked, etc. And our processes, the things that we're doing are all okay. But, excuse me, I'll give a bit more information in April when I do the usual update about RIPA and IPA. And positive news about the partnership that we received last week is that Stroud are going to join the partnership as well. So that's really positive. We have been doing work for them, as you know, but it's been on a sort of a very ring-fenced certain areas, but they'll be joining the partnership. So only beneficial to share good practice across the county. Happy to take any questions about the report.
Paul.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to pick up on paragraph 3.4 because last time this statistic was mentioned, the media picked up on it in a very negative light. 36,334 has not been repaid and the liability of the recovery has been transferred to DBT. This council paid in excess of £50 million in business grants. So I just want that perspective. 36,000 against in excess of £50 million. I think that is an absolutely awesome statistic in terms of fraud for this council, and whilst it wouldn't be dignified for me to name and shame, but there are a significant number of councils that are nowhere near that level of performance. Thank you.
Right, that's extremely encouraging, I think. David, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight a few things from the report which I like reading these reports. They are good news. So at 3.8, we have got 128, well, almost £129,000 in loss avoidance in regard of housing waiting lists. And that isn't just the financial benefit, that's people that need priority housing being in the right place in the queue. So that is something where this is actually making a difference to some people who really do need the services of the council. And I think it's worth drawing that out. There's also what's been dealt with public protection. So we have got the work being done to protect people from unlawful evictions by the looks of this, which resulted in what doesn't seem to be a particularly big fine, but quite considerable costs, which I think put the cost of the work into perspective. And also the work on getting council tax revenue and an extra £9,000 into our council tax revenue is always to be welcome, as well as the fact that there were two criminal penalties and one civil penalty. And again, I think it's a reminder that the council is doing what it can to detect, and it's successfully detecting that fraud. And I hope we can get that more widely publicised so that people are less tempted to try it, because there's a much better chance that they will be caught. So I think this is really, really good work, and we should recognise the team for what they are delivering. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm very keen to echo those comments. I think the counter-fraud team are doing a fantastic job. It is a little bit scary how many ways in which the council can potentially be defrauded, but it's nice to know that we've got a strong team working on that. Just one more a question that about a group that I don't quite understand their place. We refer to the governance group. What in that sort of structure, where does it fit? If you're familiar with that, that's a sort of what is that a? It's not a member group, presumably, the governance group. You talk about that in the appendix.
So that's an officer group.
It's an officer group. Okay.
Yes. Paul attends, Gareth attends, Anne attends, Lucy attends. So it's about the general risk governance, etc. Okay. So we all provide a report. So if there were any particular matters of concern, I would raise them at that group. If they were urgent, they'd have been raised.
Can you potentially bring them in here if there was anything you wanted us to know about?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that. Any other questions for Emma? Matt, Councillor Babbage.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a general question. I was just wondering what interactions you have with like financial institutions, I mean banks primarily, obviously, but obviously they're very active in terms of counter fraud and that. I don't know how closely you work with them. I wonder if you just say a bit more about it, assuming you can say a bit more about it.
So in terms of, there's lots of different angles. So we've got a number of agreements with different bodies, etc., for obtaining and sharing information for evidence purposes. In addition, the MAF group, which I talk about, where we are part of that group with the police, trading standards, the NHS, etc. That's trying to bring about a bit more of a cohesive approach to fraud, because whilst you say, you know, there's so many ways people commit fraud, it's now the most prevalent crime in the UK. So it's about the fact that it's in everything, and it's how we tackle that. So the financial institutions are keyed into that group. So they're doing a lot of work to safeguard people regarding if they turn up and suddenly want to take a load of money out, making sure they ask the right questions about this isn't for to avoid courier fraud and the like. And we in turn are feeding information back so that we can all share best practice and put out some information to members of the public, etc. And best practice, so what are they doing that we could learn from and say, right, we need to try and manage it. Problem is the risks are ever changing, as you can imagine, and there are scams and different types of fraud that come up all of the time. So the point of the MAF groups nationally is to try and bring lots of bodies together so that we can tackle better deterrent activity, prevention activity, because that's the best approach. Trying to get money back once it's gone is really, really difficult, as you can imagine. So we are through the different groups, and as I say, any join up we can do, we will be.
Thanks, Emma. Anything else from the four councillors, or are you happy that we proceed to note that report also and move on to the final report of the night, which is also Emma, I believe. It's to look at the penalty and prosecution policy for council tax housing benefit and council tax support. I know there's some changes to the numbers, as you'd expect, you know, with inflation and so forth. Are there any other changes in here that that you think we should be aware of that we might want to comment on? Thanks.
Yes, apologies. Normally I would change it and have the track changes in red so you can see what we've actually changed, but a colleague of mine within the team did the original review, and my fault entirely. I didn't ask her to do that. No, it isn't significantly changed. The content is so legislative and the legislation hasn't changed. What has changed is departments, as I say, and names of people, services, and what we wanted to do was bring one policy together for all 6 councils rather than having each council having an individual one, because again it's so legislative. We undertake council tax support investigations for all 6 of those councils, so again applying some continuity, but the revisions are really minimal. It's all about titles or names of departments, etc. The content hasn't changed, and the value of the penalty, the £500, which I referenced at 3.6. So we can set that figure if we wanted to different, but it's £500 as it was before at Cheltenham. That hasn't altered.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I only asked because I did quickly read through this and I couldn't see anything that was particularly contentious, and I just wondered if there's anything that changed. Are there any questions for Emma about this, or are we happy to accept this policy as it's now drafted? I think we are. So I think I'd like to vote on that. Are you all in favour of accepting this new policy? Please show your hands. Thank you. That's unanimous. And that brings us on to item 11, which is the work plan. So at this stage, I'd like to ask you if 4 of you have any items that you're concerned about in this or wish to raise for adding to the plan. Councillor Willingham.
Thank you, Chair. I've raised this alternatively within the council and haven't got a particularly satisfactory response. It's going to be quite a technical request, so bear with me. We have a plan. We have our joint core strategy planning policy document, which has within it a policy SD12 about affordable housing, and at section 9 of SD12, it says that, and I'll read from the policy, councils consider that the information submitted as part of and in support of a viability assessment should be treated transparently and be available for wider scrutiny. In submitting information, applicants should do so in the knowledge that this will be made publicly available alongside other, and it's application documents, but planning application documents. Based on a planning hearing that I attended either last month or the month before, those documents weren't available and weren't made available to the public or to the committee in regard of a viability assessment in terms of affordable housing. And I am concerned that we're not following, or the planning is not following our own documented guidance, and I would rather that we as a council looked at this and sought to correct it before someone potentially takes rather expensive legal action to challenge the council as to whether the decision is sound, because the documents we say we should be publishing have not been published. I can explain that in more detail, but it's effectively our planning complying with the publicity requirements for SD12 of the Joint Core Strategy. And it is a request to look at. I could go into more detail, but I don't think it's going to really be something that the committee or anyone watching really wants to go into. Is quite minutiae, but I think it's important for the council, if we think there is an error, to look at it ourselves rather than the more expensive option of having the legal costs of someone learned barrister pointing this out in the High Court and it being found against us upon judicial review. So I think it's constructive we look at it ourselves. Thank you.
I'm aware that of this issue within the planning committee as a member of the planning committee. I'm not sure we've got exactly the right officers here to comment fully, but I think Paul would like to come in on this one.
Okay, so thank you, Councillor Willingham. Obviously, for the purpose of the minutes, that will be recorded as an action for us to take away. Primarily, what what we being myself and Lucy, Chief Internal Auditor, will obviously pick this up with Director of Planning in the first instance, and obviously we'll report back accordingly.
Any other member got any comments on the audit plan or anything they'd like to add to it in the way that Councillor Winningham has described? Is there anything of similar note? If not, Paul, over to Paul again.
I think it's probably worth pointing out that clearly the annual sort of audit plan is structured in what I would term a normal year. Clearly we are tonight approving the 21-22 accounts, and so by default in a normal year we'd probably be looking at the 22-23 accounts. So this will obviously be subject to change because clearly, as Alex has pointed out, there will be the value for money report. There will at some point be the 22-23 accounts, and I have every confidence that by 24-25 we will be back into a normal cycle. But so with that caveat, there's nothing else to add.
So from your perspective, this represents the ideal year, really, that obviously circumstances can overtake. Excellent. Okay. Do we need to vote on that or just note it? I think we just need to note that. So that brings us on to item 12. Any other item that the Chairman determines to be urgent or requires a decision? There are none of those. So I can declare this meeting closed at 7 o'clock, and the next meeting is on the 29th of November. Thank you very much.